All right, for more, we are now joined by Kate Fisher from Washington, D.C. Kate, so just how significant is it that President Trump notified Congress that fighting had resumed in Iran? Is he setting out a clearer path for the conflict?
Well, I think it's significant that it essentially acknowledges that any chance of a ceasefire is now over, and it gives him a little bit of leeway again before he officially needs to seek congressional approval for this war. He's essentially restarted that clock on the 7th of July, and he has now 60 days before he needs to go to lawmakers for their authorization. But in terms of actually moving things along, he's essentially going back to how things were. This naval blockade that's coming back on Tuesday, the airstrikes, of course, we're in our third night of those, and then the Strait of Hormuz. This is really controversial, saying that it's now the US that will charge a toll, having had senior members of his cabinet saying that when the Iranians suggested that, it was simply not acceptable in terms of, international norms. So that's a complete switch over. And I think it shows that the president is trying to essentially take control of a situation that is really very difficult to control. And this announcement sort of being another sign of that. And to that end, he said that he's now going to address the nation on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so prime time television. He hasn't said what he's going to talk about in that speech, but clearly Iran is very likely to be one of the topics, if not the topic.
All right, Kate, thank you. Appreciate the update. Kate Fisher with the latest from Washington, D.C. All right, let's get now to Armin Saikel. He's Emeritus Professor of Middle Eastern, Central Asian and Islamic Studies at the Australian National University. He's also adjunct Senior Research Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at NTU. Professor, good to have you. So how is a 20%, U.S. protection fee different from an Iranian toll for shippers in the Strait? This sounds like a swap with the same net result, meaning higher energy prices and also supply chain disruptions.
You're absolutely right. It's not really much different at all. When the Iranians proposed that, they wanted what they called an environmental fee or management fee. The United States totally opposed it. In fact, Secretary of State Marco Rubio came out and said that there should be absolutely no toll on the passage of ships through international waters, international waterways, and he regarded the Strait of Hormuz as an international waterway, and therefore there should be absolutely no tolls or any kind of fees. But now President Trump himself has announced that he's going to charge 20%, which is, it raises a number of really questions. First of all, how is he going to really enforce it? Does he have the necessary mechanism on the ground to charge that sort of fee? And secondly, as you said it in your introduction, that they will be charging something like $30 million per tanker. The price of oil will really shoot up through the roof. So the world economy once again is going to be taken hostage to high prices of oil. To me, it appears that the United States does not have a very thought out strategy in handling the crisis that they have created in the region. And President Trump is basically reacting on a daily basis to this crisis. And the Iranians are always in a position to disrupt the shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, even if the United States degraded the Iranian defensive and offensive capability, which at the moment, I think the United States is trying to do it through a war of attrition.
You said this may be something impromptu strategy, but how serious should we take this announcement? Is this a serious policy proposal or a negotiating tactic? What do you think Mr. Trump is ultimately trying to achieve here?
Well, it's very hard to tell with President Trump. Sometimes he makes these very bold statements, and it is more of a sort of occasional reactions or knee-jerk reactions to situation. I mean, there is no clear strategy which has been sort of outlined how to really handle this crisis. And that is causing a lot of confusion, not only in the United States and around the world, but also for the Iranians. And of course, the Iranian position is very clear. The Strait of Hormuz is a part of our world and it's part of our territorial waters, and therefore we are in a position to control the Strait of Hormuz. And I think the United States will find it very costly for itself to make sure that it is in charge of running of the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, President Trump has said in the past that he wants to really control the Panama Canal, and that has not really happened. So I think it could be a sort of a bold statement, as he usually makes, or possibly that is what he has precisely in mind, and he has informed the Congress that the war has resumed, and he will continue this. But how long he can really maintain his forces on in the region is again going to be very costly for the United States. And I would be very surprised that, for example, insurance companies will be happy to insure these ships going through the strait under the American protection, while the Iranians are in a position to disrupt the whole process.
Right. So, Professor, I want to ask you about this blowback, not just from insurers, there's the global shippers, there's the Asian countries who import a lot of their oil from that part of the world as well. A number you mentioned, it puts it all in context, 20% on a super tanker could be 30 million in terms of a fee. So do you think they're going to stay quiet about it, or are they going to do something about it and say something about it?
I think the international community would have to really react to that, and particularly the Asian countries, which are very much dependent on the flow of oil from through the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, there's something like 20% of the world oil consumptions really flow through that passage. It's certainly going to seriously affect the economies and the energy market in Southeast Asia, and of course also in the rest of Asia. And I think China will be very much alert to this situation because the Chinese have been importing considerable amount of their oil needs from Iran. And of course, that will be stopped because President Trump has once again reimposed all those restrictions on the passage of tankers, and they can only really go through the Strait of Hormuz with the permission of the United States. But again, that is very much up in the air. Whether the United States can really enforce that measure remains to be seen.
And Professor, so does today's announcement change the trajectory of the conflict? I mean, is there still a realistic path to de-escalation at this point?
Well, I mean, it does change the trajectory in the sense that we are going to go back to the original situation in terms of resumption of the war, but I think this time it's going to be somewhat different than before. The United States will conduct operations from time to time rather than being absolutely continuous, and they have obviously identified a large number of targets that they want to hit in order to degrade the Iranian defensive and offensive capabilities. But again, the United States did this for 6 weeks along with the support of Israel. They didn't really get anywhere. The Iranians are not really going to back down. I think the Strait of Hormuz is absolutely critical to Iran's bargaining position, and therefore it has become a very critical leverage for Tehran, and Tehran will continue to do whatever it can to maintain control or extensive influence over the Strait of Hormuz.
All right, Professor, we leave it there. Professor Amin Saikal is Emeritus Professor of Middle Eastern, Central Asian and Islamic Studies at the Australian National University. Is also Adjunct Senior Research Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at NTU.